Hello, everybody, and welcome to Optional Rule. My name is Scott. I'm the host of this weekly show discussing all things D&D, session prep, talk about my own session prep techniques you can use in your games, encounter design, all sorts of things related to gaming, and with the focus on games at play. So I hope you'll join me every week in the discussion. I really hope you'll go ahead and drop a hello or a question or anything down in chat to discuss things today. It's great to have you here. It's great to talk to other people in the community. This is just an informal discussion, so if you have anything on your mind, please go ahead and bring it up. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by looking at myself. But I try to have a good time here. Talk about all things D&D, things that'll help you run a game in actual play. So, hey there, Arvind Sundar. It's great to have you here. Thank you very much for asking a question in Twitter. I'm going to go ahead and actually make that the topic of today's show, of all things. So what am I talking about today? First of all, actually, before we get into it, I'm a small streamer, just D&D discussion and session prep. It would always help me out if you give a like, subscribe, share this video on your social media, drop some comments, all of those kinds of things, social media things. It would be really, really helpful if you did that. I do it every week, so I hope you will join me every week at noon on Saturdays. Most every week, I think I've missed one or two sessions in the last year. I've been doing it since September of last year. Anyway, I'm sorry for not pronouncing your name right, Arvind Sundar. Asked a question in Twitter today, which I'll share, which is, could you give me some tips on taking notes, maintaining notes as a dungeon master? I've got a Google sheet and tried using the loopy planning method, and everything is going all over the place. Yeah, that's a great question, and actually, it's an ever-present problem for game masters. So I'm actually going to talk about the way I take notes. First of all, I'm going to key you in, and I don't know that I'm going to come up with something very neat, but I'll show you a couple techniques that I lean into that help me maintain some sense of sanity in my note keeping in D&D, and some things I can use. So first of all, I am going to suggest to you the loopy planning method by John 4 of Role Playing Tips. Yeah, I'm familiar with that. I think that's great. That I call that spiral campaign design, which I'll get to in a second. But this technique should jive with that. I think that keeping notes as the DM is a difficult thing because campaigns are chaotic messes if you're doing it right? Players are injecting their own storylines, you're evolving storylines over time. Sometimes you're halfway through something and you get a better idea. I know that happens to me all the time. Hell, sometimes the players give you a better idea. They give you a suspicion of what's going on, and you think as the DM, wow, damn, that's a lot better than what I had planned. And I usually switch it to that if it's a better plot line. Because I want dope stuff to happen in a game. That's what I want. I want a great game to unfold in front of my players. I want to enjoy that game. I love being surprised as a DM. I'd love to hear anyone's experience on this, but something that I don't think people understand and or at least is under discussed in D&D is the DM is assumed to have this perfect knowledge, which is kind of true, but there's this mistaken assumption that the DM can't be surprised. And I'm surprised as the DM all the time, and I love to be surprised, not just by the players. Sometimes I surprise myself. I come up with an idea. Sometimes I chain two ideas together and I didn't realize how it was going to work out. Sometimes the dice surprise me. I love being surprised as a DM and having a new set of discovery about where something is going. So anyway, keeping notes in the midst of all that chaos is a challenging endeavor at best. So first thing I'm going to suggest, John 4, Role-Playing Tips, great, the loopy planning method. Although the thing I adhere to very strongly, there's a creator, you're probably familiar with him, Sly Flourish, slyflourish.com. Mike Shea is his real name. Great thinker and great designer in the D&D space. He has a book called Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. And I'm actually going to go Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. There you go. Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. Sly's site comes up. The first thing, this is a great book. It is probably, I would recommend this book more than almost any other book out there. It covers designing your adventure, keeping your notes. I'm going to talk about some techniques that I use from that and a lot of other techniques I mix in from other things. But I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, but I highly recommend this. It's an easy read. Mike has a great feel for how games are run. He's a sort of a grumpy old man like I am, so I have a love for that. So he has a stream too. I'm prefacing that by a stream. Check him out on YouTube and Twitch. Mike Shea, Sly Flourish. You can just Google for him and find him. He runs a session prep every week where he talks through his steps of Return to Lazy Dungeon Master and actually prepares his game. So it's great to see it happen in real time. Yeah, grumpy old man for the win. Yeah, that's right. I try not to be too grumpy. I try to be grumpy with a heart of gold, right? So in other words, I am grumpy at people telling me what I have to do and have to not do. But if you need to do something, by all means, you do that. So that's what I'm grumpy about. The Indian DM, I'd love to hear your thoughts on planning out a large overarching storyline for a series of plot points and how do you work your planning stuff around it. Yeah, I'm going to actually talk a little bit about that today because so the first thing you need to understand is there is no single solution to all of your DM note-taking problems, right? You're just going to have to, understand tools are not your solution. Tools help guide your discipline. It helps focus your time, which is super important to me. It helps refine your technique, but it's not a replacement for discipline of actually keeping notes. So at the end of the day, you're going to have to develop some sort of discipline to do that. Now, the way you do that, tools definitely influence that discipline. You don't want tools that get in your way. So I'm not a big fan of things like World Anvil or Obsidian Portal, or I've tried these campaign management tools, and I just find I'm wrestling with the tool more than I'm actually taking notes. And I do not like that. I don't suggest it. So I just use something called Notion.so. It's become popular in the gaming space lately. It's just kind of a replacement for OneNote, but really it doesn't matter. You can use Google Docs, which I've used before. You can use lots of different things, but I use this. So I just need the easiest thing for me is like a markdown document that just does it really easily, and I don't have to do a lot of struggling with the tools. So the second thing to realize after you're past the tooling is that you have to understand the levels at which you want to keep notes. So there's generally 3 levels of notes that you need to keep, and that doesn't sound great, but it doesn't have to be more complex than you think. The first is actually let me talk first around I'm debating with myself where to start. Let me talk about the 3 levels first, and then I'll get into the thing you want to avoid, a misconception. So the 3 levels are really the campaign itself. So the overarching campaign. Then there's the adventure design, which includes the encounters and the overall sort of backstory and plots. So the world campaign. The campaign is about the progressive set of things that will happen in your campaign and the underlying plot line. So that's all you need. It's a meta level document. It can be very short. What are my main plot lines going? What's the progression of that? Of those plot lines if the players don't get involved, what happens with them. I take an assumption when I design my notes that the world is going to skew towards bad. It's going to go kind of spiral downward without intervention by the players, and that's why the players are heroes, right? So so that document just keeps a high level, what's the plot and what's the progression of something if the players don't fail or don't get involved. And that's a technique called fronts, which came out. It's most strongly associated with Dungeon World, although a guy wrote that before Dungeon World back in I think it was early 2000s. And I'm embarrassed not to be able to credit that creator, but it's a great sort of technique. And it's just simply stating out what's the current situation, what's looming on the horizon, and where are you going from here? Actually, now looming and on the horizon. So when and I use it, you can see this is an actual note I have for my campaign. So by the way, light spoilers for Rime of the Frost Maiden. I don't think I'm going to talk tons about it here, but I am going to talk about my campaign. So if you're one of my players, probably not good to hang out today. So there's just 3 things you need to keep. There's this concept when preparing for a game called staying a chapter ahead. And that's if you're running a module, but it also applies to your campaign. In other words, you don't need to have the whole campaign in your head. You don't need to have this grand story arc and in your mind that has to play out. Matter of fact, that's bad because you're locked into rigid thinking about how the game goes. You just need to stay a chapter ahead of the players. In other words, you know what's next, right? What's the next step, so you can tease and foreshadow and bring things in. And maybe you want a vague sense of what are the big story elements, the big mechanisms that the dials you're going to turn and levers you're going to pull to tease things coming up in the future. That's all you really need. So fronts help you do that. So in other words, that's that broad level world stuff that I'm going to cover here. Then there's the like the encounters or sessions you're getting into that detail like a specific location, specific faction, that location, blah, blah, blah. And then there's the session notes themselves. Like I have a session coming up, and that's a mix of some of the plot lines from the world. That's a mix of some of the session notes that I have coming up. But it's really just, what do I need for that next 3 hours of play? And that's your bread and butter. The Return to Lazy Dungeon Master uses a small technique that I'll actually show you the format of those notes here in a moment, but that's the bread and butter, is what's happening in the next session, because you're really just blending in items from those two higher level of notes to get you through the next session and run something sort of interesting. Something is a powerful tool. The Indian DM, powerful tool for local file-based note-taking in text or markdown. Yeah, Notion SO. I like it. It's good. Although you can use anything. You can use a GitHub repository. You can use really anything you want. Yeah, it's the way to go. So these are going to be messy because these are the actual campaign notes for me. So session notes, which I just talked about with the Return to Lazy Dungeon Master. Actually, I'll go back so I don't reveal anything from my campaign. This should not, well, I might as well. Actually, I guess it doesn't matter because I just told players they can go away. So let's start with the lowest level, which is your session notes. These are my session notes, literally from the last session that I did on Thursday night. So the format here is this is my modified version of Return to Lazy Dungeon Master. So first of all, I put my big links up at the top of my document. So I have a campaign calendar, I have a campaign zoom. The campaign calendar is a nice to have. I do run that, and I'll show you that in a session, but actually, so let's do now. So this is the campaign. It's a Faerunian campaign. It's simplified calendar. It's a simplified version of it. I mark out like when the player started, which was like over here. Mark, line through the days where they've already gone. I have, I add a note like when they were right here, arrived Bryn Shander and reveal the Harpers. So I kind of know like, oh, 3 weeks ago something happened. This is where the players are right here. They returned from Ysgard. Matter of fact, I need to update it here because there's all these big milestones. Recruit guards for and a librarian for their home headquarters. Defeat Onas Coldfire. I just marked these big milestones. So the players returned from Ysgard here. Then they waited about, I think it was a week or so. Yeah, so they waited about, actually, sometimes the players don't know and I don't know. So I just guess. So I just guess, mark out these days, and I will say that they set out. So on here, I'll just add a note of, insert note, set out for the tribal moot. So the players encountered that they have to go on this plot where they're setting out to talk to a gathering of the Reghead tribes that are happening, or they're going to slip in the background and try to steal something that they have. I'm not going to get into the plot because it's not important here. But and I'll sort of note this is where they fight the Knoll vampire, because that's the last that we wrapped up the last session in the middle of a fight with a Knoll vampire, which is pretty cool. So yeah, this is a helpful technique. If I ever have a question from a player of like, when did so and so happen, I just look back on these big notes, pick up their quest. I ambushed by who and so met a key NPC. I just put that in here, and it really helps me keep a sense of like how much time has passed, what are the major milestones. It's kind of fun to look back to. Anyway, I put all of this in this any external tool I put up at the top. Then this is from the Return to Lazy Dungeon Master. Summarize the players. So I put the player character, their gnome wizard of the Conclave, and Silvery Moon, a scholar looking to make a big discovery. So put their player goals in here, and they want to thwart the Arcane Brotherhood. They are, and the player doesn't know this, but they're a cursed vessel of Orcus. So that has something meaning in my campaign. If they kill somebody, they're a wizard. So if they kill somebody with necromancy, that person automatically comes back as an uncontrolled undead. They've discovered that. That was a cool plot. And then I list player traits. This is not in the Return to Lazy Dungeon Master, but I do this myself. So I observe the players and I try to find out what it is that they like. What do they react to? Feedback is a great mechanism, but I always say this: people act like you just ask somebody a question and they give you an honest and fully realized answer. That is not true. Not because they're trying to be obscure, but sometimes people don't know what it is that they liked about something. Sometimes they don't realize what it was that they really liked. Sometimes they thought they wanted something else. Sometimes they are just reacting to what the last thing that happened was, rather than what do they really like overall. So you have to watch them. Feedback is a multi-billion-dollar player or player character traits. These are player traits that I'm listing. What is a player like? Like, do they tend, players, no matter what character they play, tend to key in on certain things. Like they might like role playing, they might like lore, they might like, so this player here, they love obscure lore. That player loves that discovery of their character, to get into discover obscure lore. They like artifacts, they like puzzles and role playing quips. So like that chance for saying things. Like this player, Tracy, likes combat, opportunities to command, likes an opportunity to flirt, and avoids rules. She does not like rules. So I take these direct notes of what the players like to look back at it, to kind of key myself in as I'm designing my scenario. Like, what do they like? What do they do? I don't have to rewrite this every time because this is a separate session note. I just copy it and I delete out the stuff I don't need for the next session and add in the new stuff. I usually write in where we were last session, although honestly, I've not been able to keep this up very well. So yeah. So the then I have a theme section. This is my own ad. I like to keep a consistent theme throughout I'm running Rime of the Frost Maiden. Its themes are isolation, secrets, paranoia, horror, then the Arcane Brotherhood, and Orville's Reign of Terror. I deleted that by accident sometime. Terror. So I always, when I'm trying to create a plot thread, or I'm trying to create a strong start, or I'm trying to create whatever, I go back to what are my themes. Does it tie into some theme that I'm trying to use? And then I add a quick note of what do I want out of this session, just again to remind myself, listen, we just got out of like this one was role playing and exploring player options. The reason being is the previous two sessions were intensely combat focused. So I wanted some breathing room. I wanted them some space to talk about their characters and talk to each other. So and then I just add two notes. They had two quests in front of them: Lost Spire of Netheril, then the Cave of the Berserkers. They have to recover this Norn's heart. I added this whole plot line in Rime of the Frost Maiden. It's entirely my own. I'm not going to bother getting to that here, but they basically had to recover the missing pieces of a soul of a Norn from the plane of Isgard. And her mind is in one place and her heart is another. And then I just write the quick plot threads up here. So plot threads, this is again my own ad. Members of the Arcane Brotherhood have been fighting each other through the intermediaries to gain the upper hand and take magic of Vidandri, that's the Norn, for themselves. And then the other plot line is Orville's Realm of Winter. She's trying to turn Icewind Dale into a consumption zone with a few planes closer to overlapping in this region. Grey Waste, Frostfell, Gehenna, all that kind of stuff. And she's attempting to create her own pocket realm like Eberron by sacrificing some of her soul. Let's see. So what do we have? So Indian DM, when they have multiple quests in front of them, say about 7 to 9 of them, how do you plan that out? All right. Sorry, my phone was ringing. How do I first of all, I don't put 7 to 9 quests in front of the players, but I'll show you a way you can do that. So I'm running Rime of the Frost Maiden, so I wouldn't do that. 7 to 9 I think is just too much. I don't think you want more than 3. 3, just that's a number that crops up in D&D. It's not magic. It's just how many different things can players keep track of at any given time, right? So let's look at Rime of the Frost Maiden, actually. Let's go to that tower. So in the case of a module like I have, it's a very sandboxy, D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond. In the case of Icewind Dale, they've got these adventures laid out before me. So I'm running 1, 2, and really not even 3. Chapters 1 and 2, that's all I've really used so far, and they're already at 5th level. So I know I have all of these go-to things, and something I've learned is to stop feeding players that many options. Like they can choose to go off on a 4th plot, like create their own plot. Like I'll give them 3 separate plots. Right now they've got 2 because they just finished the 3rd. Because we're trying to come to the end of the adventure. So I'm narrowing them down to different plots. But basically, I let them sit around. I ask the players, what are you doing next session? And I know what options I have in front of me. So Lost Spire of Nethril and Cave of Berserkers. At other times, they had 3 different people to follow, 3 different people to follow. So what I always do is I put a single line, and that's what I think you should do. So put a single line of plot, what's the stakes? So always what's the stakes? And then have in mind what happens if they don't take it. I really love to create this scenario where there's things happening in the world. The players can't get to everything. So when you use this technique of fronts, which I'll actually show you in a second what that is. I just have the other plots that they weren't able to get to progress and give them what happened here when they didn't get to so and so. They heard of some rumor of some location happening, and they'll hear what the outcome of that. And it's usually a bad one, right? Not always, but usually a bad one. Like something they missed the players. For instance, when I was running the Dragon of Icespire Peak, and that's a sandbox adventure where you get a job board, basically. And they would get a job board and have things in front of them. And what would happen is I would progress that adventure. What happens if the players didn't show up? So there was a sighting of a manticore, an herbalist on the edge of town, an old woman that someone wanted you to check into because they hadn't heard from her in a while. And the players go there and they find a manticore attacking her. Well, the players didn't choose that one, so she died. And the result of that was that all healing potions were double the cost in town. So I put that plot line of that's what it is, and if they don't do it, she dies. All potions and healing potions are double the price, so there's an impact for that. So just write those 7 to 9 lines of what the plot is and what the outcome is if the player doesn't pursue it. I actually think that's a great technique to use. There's a technique called fronts, which I'll get to in a second for campaign planning, but I don't think you need to go to full-on fronts. If you have 7 to 9 major plot arcs, like these are not just a quest, but a plot arc, that's way too many. Yeah, the Indian DM, interesting. I like the distinction between feeding them extra options and letting them choose their own path. I was petrified of railroading, and that's why I made it into a sandbox. Yeah, I mean, it's worth saying. Matt Colville has a great video on railroading. It's understanding, giving players a pathway forward, giving them a plot, giving them a quest. That's not railroading. That's not railroading at all. That's direction. That's giving them something else. Now, the players can say, well, I'm more interested in making contacts with the local hunters, so I'm going to go out and do a hunting quest instead of my own. And they might create their own plot. Letting them do that, that's sandboxy. Giving them a quest is still sandboxy, but it's giving them a direction to know what to do next. A game is essentially this agreed upon direction where the players agree to everyone needs to be a champion of the story at a role-playing game. Everybody, the GM, the players, and everyone. That means players bite at plot hooks, players introduce plot hooks of their own, the GM bites at those. That's a great exchange of the ways things should go. It's not a railroad to just say, well, this is the plot. If you have one plot in front of you and the players don't do it, and then the game is, okay, well, you sit around for a week and nothing happens, that's actually reasonable. You don't have to give the player something interesting no matter what in the game. It's okay to have a plot line and want that to move forward. Now, it's also okay to, if you can come up with a great idea for some option they wanted, by all means do that. But sometimes as a game master, I just got nothing. Like I go talk to X. Okay, I don't know what to do with that. My current players are actually pretty bad at that. I love them, but this one bad thing that a habit a player can get into is they think they're initiating an action when they in fact are not. They'll say, well, I go visit so-and-so. Okay, why do I care about that? So they go to some place, have their character go to some place. They don't interact with anybody in any meaningful way. They just say, well, what are you doing today? Expecting the DM to be this plot dispenser, like things pop out. And that's not really how it works. If the player wants to create their own plot line, a great trait, they should go with some goal in mind. Tell the DM, what do I want out of this? I want to go to see if I can start a library in this region because they don't have enough. Like I had a player one time say, well, I look for a library in Phandalin, the Lost Mines of Phandelver. There was no library in Phandalin. In retrospect, I wish I had had some old guy who was a drunk who just for some reason decided to collect old scrolls people left behind, but I didn't think of that in the moment. So, but what I wish the player had done is said, oh, I want a character goal of creating a library here. Because that would be a great character goal. That would have been amazing. They could have talked to the town mayor. They could have negotiated for a building and a place to keep it. They could have talked to people in town to see if they have scrolls or books or started to record oral histories. Anything like that would have been fantastic. But it was the players just like, well, I look for something, DM, throw something at me. And if you have nothing, they walk away. So, yeah. So anyway, so what is a railroad? If a railroad is not any of those things, what is a railroad? A railroad is telling players what choices, giving player only a small series of valid choices. In other words, you lay the plot out for them. That's not a railroad. But if you say, well, they had to go to this building next instead of that building, and then there's walls in the world and you don't let them go, or so, that's a railroad. You say, well, some other choice that you wouldn't have made as a game master, that's reasonable. You don't let succeed just because it wasn't the choice you wanted. That's a railroad. But just giving a player a direction is not railroading. So I just want to be clear about that. The Indian DM. I have tried to study and understand fronts, but I was not able to figure them out. Okay, well let's hop over to that before. So because let's hop over to that. I know I'm screw it. This is a sandbox sandbox live stream. All right, so let's go over to fronts. I use them in my campaign. So here they are in chapter 3. Plot lines in front. So I list out a couple of quick bullets. Now, as a DM, I don't think you need to do more than just put bullets down. People write these long, elaborate backstories. I don't see where the service comes in of that. I really think you need to be conservative because I've written these long backstories and then I forget what I wrote. I can't even find my own note. So if I can keep things in a short bullet format, that really helps me a lot. So what I have here is, like, I don't have fronts written for real, so we'll write a few here, actually. We're down again to the last third of the campaign, so we're down to just 2 big major plot lines that the players are interested in. They can pursue their own if they want. But so what I do is I just give it a top-level thing. The Arcane Brotherhoods, which is an established villain in the game, the search for the hidden elements of Verdandri's, the Norn, I said before, soul to claim for their own power. So Orville's Reign of Winter. So I gave a background to why this is happening because I didn't like the modules sort of loose and undefined reasoning. So instead, what I said is Orville went to the plane of Ysgard. She killed a Norn, tore her soul apart. The Norn's power is that she sings, and Norn is sort of like a mythical feature in Asgard in Norse mythology that run some aspect of poetry or the seasons or something like that. So I said this Norn was responsible for the changing of the seasons. Her voice, she would sing in the summer and winter as it went back. So she tore this Norn apart and took her voice. So she's using the Norn's voice to sing in winter every night, and that's what's taxing her power. That's why the long winter is staying in. That's what Orville is doing. Now, Norn, these gods from the other planes, they're immortal. They can't be killed. But she to keep the Norn from reforming, she's torn her soul apart. So she's hidden the Norn's mind in one place. That's that lost spire of Netheril, and her heart in another place. And the players have recovered this egg that the Norn can be born from. I'm leaning into folklore here. And if they can reunite the egg with the heart and the mind, and then go and defeat Orville and reunite it with the voice, the Norn will be reborn and Orville will be defeated. That's the basic plot line. I don't have that written here because whatever. That's for after these 2 items. So so in the back plot line is the Arcane Brotherhood are searching for the mind and the heart because they want to claim it for their own. And the stakes of this, there should always be stakes in these plot lines, is that the Arcane Brotherhood are going to take him out of the region and will render Orville people unable to defeat Orville because they'll take away the components that they need to bring together to defeat Orville and keep her from changing it to winter. So the Arcane Brotherhood are cutting deals with power players in the region to recover these items, and they're giving bad support to the region. In other words, they're undermining the whole place. The Arcane Brotherhood, they wanted to free a colleague in prison to gain knowledge of a key to the Netherese Spire where the mind is located, and the Arcane Brotherhood is subverting each other via proxies. And I have 2 members who are left alive now. Avarice, she's allied with the Duragar and the devil worshippers in an area. Background is not important. And Verlaine, she's allied with the Reghead tribes and the Frost Giants. So in other words, there's these machinations of these 2 people. Their guild rules prevent them from trying to kill each other, but they make alliances and try to have their allies kill each other all the time. So the fronts. So let's use fronts. So what you need, stay 1 chapter ahead. Remember that advice. So all you need to stay a chapter ahead. So what's happening right now? What's the world like right now because of this plot line? What's about to happen if something doesn't happen to disrupt that or stop it? And then what are we looking at? What threat are we looking at if this all unfolds unimpeded? Right? So should be always some threat. That's the on the horizon thing. So because of Orville's thing, they know the players need to get a hold of these items of the Norn soul. They know now that the Arcane Brotherhood is looking for it. So that's stakes. They are in a race to get these items of the Norn soul back before the Arcane Brotherhood gets them, because they're going to disappear with them. So right now, there's various factions at each other's throat in an attempt for the Arcane Brotherhood to undermine each other. That's a secret plot line. As a matter of fact, I can keep that secret. The players don't realize it. There's been all this, for the entire campaign, there's all this disruption of people at each other's throat for no apparent reason. The Duragar have been attacking. There's a reason in the module, but I've changed it. They don't know why. The Reghead tribes are all stirred up. They don't know why. They're going to realize through the course of this adventure that this has all been a manipulation by the Arcane Brotherhood to try to undermine each other, just political manipulation. So that's the first one. Looming, I remember, gains the upper hand, and their factions begin to overrun the region. So I have 2 factions: the Duragar Devil Worshippers, or the Reghead tribes and the Frost Giants. So if one of the Arcane if the players fail in trying to get these items for the Norn, and the Arcane Brotherhood members get it instead, that member's allies will begin to overrun the region. So Duragar will be able to take out a town in the 10 towns. Devil worshippers that the players defeated earlier will be able to establish themselves, or the Reghead tribes will do the same thing. And the Frost Giants will begin to serve Orville directly and block players from getting to her fortress. So, and then on the horizon, once they get both items, they're gone. They're going to leave. And basically, Icewind Dale at that point is screwed. And the only thing left is for people to get the hell out of the region, because there's almost no way to stop Orville. That would be a catastrophe, but that's what you need. You need risk, right? So Orville's, let's go. I'll create some fronts for Orville's Reign of Winter. So the plot line here, she's trying to turn Icewind. She's trying to create her own pocket universe. In other words, it's going to disappear, or at least become sort of this weird demi-plane, sort of like the Shadowfell, where it's sort of attached to the prime material, but her own plane. So let's talk about front. So right now, let's actually tease some things. So I've teased this. The players know this. That has been revealed as of last session. So what's now? So now what is happening is, I love this idea of, because the plane is beginning to move away, because it's now she's gotten some time to solidify her hold on the plane. I want to create this situation where extraplanar magic or teleportation or anything that requires crossing the planes now begins to get weaker over time. And I don't know how to do that. So let me think that. The Indian DM, how do you derive fronts from plot lines? So I look at the plot line and then I say, what would be neat to have happen? Like, what's at stake? Fronts are just what's at stake. What is creating the dynamic of the world right now? or it will happen as a dynamic when it happens. So knowing the plot line of Orville's trying to create her own pocket dimension, now I need to throw in some stakes that affect the players on a day-to-day basis. They can see play out in the world around them, so they can feel like their actions have impact or their defeats have impact, right? So right now, they've let Orville go on for a while, and I want to see that progress. And instead of just like it's cold and people are dying, now I want to begin to have mystical effects. So like now, cross-planar travel is more difficult. That means teleportation is half distance, and any pocket dimension type spell has half duration, like rope trick or anything like that, like banish. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do. So that's, the players are going to have to discover that. Now, this is a great example. The players might not realize that might be also Conjuration Magic. Let's say Conjuration Magic feels more difficult. Hey, how are you doing, Fever Dream Studios? Great to have you here. Feels more difficult. Now I'm stuck here. Do I want to create an effect where Conjuration Magic is half duration as well? That would be interesting. I don't have any players that are conjurers, so it wouldn't affect them tremendously, but it could be a problem, right? It could be. I don't want to needlessly hamper player characters. Conjuration heck with it, I'll do it. Conjuration feels more difficult, and conjuration spells are half duration. Man, I hope I don't regret this. Like something that they could have used to save each other, they are unable to use. So that's happening now. That's a front. That's something that the players can feel. Now, there's no way to do that, for them to undo this except defeat Orville, right? So let's go looming. Summons don't work. Yeah, perhaps cold spell effects are more potent. I've already done that plot, actually. That's a great idea. I've already done that. I had this front earlier that in the first third of the adventure around magical storms. So actually, I'll go to my blog, optionalrule.com. I had a progressive set of fronts region, I think it's called. Yeah, supernatural region. I had something called the Heart of Winter Supernatural Region, which was based on the supernatural regions from what was it? Tasha's called it everything. So I created a Heart of Winter Supernatural Region. Basically I would roll this effect. And these got more frequent. So the front there was that the that the 10 towns were sacrificing to prevent these magical effects from happening. So it was just backstory that the players found out that these magical storms had happened with all these crazy magical effects, and the 10 towns were able to stop them from happening by making sacrifices. Again, this is kind of my add to the plot. Then the second, so that was now. The looming was that storms begin to happen even with the sacrifices. So the amount of sacrifices had to increase to keep them. And then on the horizon was none of that worked anymore, and the magic storms just happen all the time. And they can begin things like frost and ice cover everything, cover the area rapidly for 1 minute for the duration each round on initiative 20. One random creature in the area takes 2d4 cold damage. So there's like crazy effects. Any deep snow in the region acts as quicksand for the next 10 minutes. A dense mist permeates the region. When it clears, any creatures and objects caught in the mist find themselves teleported to a random location on top of the Reghead Glacier. These are crazy effects. So yeah, that would be a great front, but I've already done that plot line. Now I want to lean in to the dimension portion. So I'm out of environmental effects now. Players are getting into tier 2. Now I want to create planar effects, things that are threatening the entire region. So yeah, that's what I want. So looming, this is what I want. So looming, creatures begin to appear more frequently. Extraplanar creatures. So outsiders begin to free from realms of cold begin to appear more frequently. So what she's trying to do is getting the icy sections of other planes like Gehenna or the Shadowfell or the Grey Waste and blah 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 to overlap here to create her own pocket dimension. So suddenly, if this progresses, so if the players linger too much, that's what's going to happen. Yeah, planar leaks. That's exactly what's happening. And what's the last one? Empowerment on the horizon. Empowered. Actually, I should add this. Any spell that does cold effect, that has a cold effect, is cast at one level higher. Is cast one level higher. All right, on the horizon. What's on the horizon here? So on the horizon is, again, this is a risk. So the players wouldn't know this unless they did some academic studies. But outsider from Cold Realm, yeah, let's just say it's cut off. So that's the so I'm setting here. This is an interesting front because this is an end game front. I'm in the last third of the campaign. This is basically what happens if the players fail, period. The region is cut off on its own. Ooh, I know what to do here. On its own. People cannot enter or leave the region anymore from the prime material plane. So basically, it's a domain of dread. I love, if you've studied Van Richten's guide, she basically turns this into a domain of icy dread. It becomes, Icewind Dale becomes a domain of dread. Ice. That's crazy. It won't happen, and if it does, yeah. So why would I ever play this out? When would this play out? The players fail utterly, right? They total party kill. I talk about what happens in Icewind Dale and say in the future people aren't able to come in, they're lost in the midst. So it's like Barovia now, right, from Curse of Strahd, except it's this crazy ice realm that's now cut off from the prime material plane, and Icewind Dale is eventually lost. So I would say I'd relate some sad tale, and the players have almost had a TPK twice now, and I'm sorry to say they might have one coming up in the next session. We have 20 minutes left. I might cover that in a section. But yeah, so this is fronts. So fronts, just don't overcomplicate fronts. What is the setup? So setup, stakes. Setup, stakes. Think of it that way. What's the setup? What's the backstory that got us here? And what is at stake? And how does that progress if the players do nothing? So the backstory is trying to establish your own domain. And the fronts are, right now, planar magic is a little harder, so the players get an indicator that cross-dimensional travel is getting more difficult, and that ice spells are getting empowered. Then and then suddenly, if that continues on for some time, ice demons begin to show up. Ice mephits begin to show up. Outsiders from other parts of planes will begin to show up that thrive in ice and domains of dread. And then the last bit is now you are stuck, like the Icewind Dale is now like Barovia. It is literally a pocket dimension on its own, domain of dread. Orville is the commander of it, and boy, do we have some problems. Yeah. Same thing with the fronts here. The Arcane Brotherhood are basically trying to get magic items for themselves because they're greedy and vain. They're warring with each other, which is a tool players can use at each other. And the fronts here are factions are fighting each other. Nobody knows. They don't know why. So the players can seek diplomatic pursuits. This should imply a stake and something the players can pursue. So investigating why, they might find out, well, we are some great ally of ours has been giving us magic to fight the 10 towns or something like that. Well, who's this great ally? And find out it's the Arcane Brotherhood behind it. over on they're looming, so that's the setup, that's their situation right now. Looming is that one of the Arcane Brotherhood members gain an item and gains the upper hand, and then they get some kind of power from it. They begin to use that, and their faction begins to, like the Duergar and the Devil Worshippers, start wiping out the Righead tribes and the Frost Giants or the Ten Towns or something like that, or vice versa. And then on the horizon they have this is also a total failure in the play. If Arcane Brotherhood gets both of these items, they flee to Silvery Moon or wherever they're going, Luskan, with these items. Now the players can't undo this Great Winter, and they're faced with, what do they do? Do they get, is it a mass evacuation scenario? Do they try to cut a deal with another god? Do they go and appeal to Luskan and try to appeal to the Arcane Brotherhood to do something? Probably not going to work. There's lots of lots of things that can go. Do these fronts change as the games progress, the D and DM? Thank you so much for asking that question. Absolutely, these change over time. These are not set in stone. These are just given the current situation. If the players introduce some change to the world, fronts might change, the stakes might change. I always like to have some stake, right? Something always coming back in. But I'm adding to these as let's say we rolled forward from looming now for the Arcane Brotherhood becomes now on the horizon as they're abandoning it, and becomes looming, and I need a new on the horizon. And that on the horizon would be Icewind Dale is doomed. Everyone will die if you don't come up with a new plan. That's the new on the horizon. Or let's say the players get one of these items for themselves. Now I might change these entirely. Like maybe now the Arcane Brotherhood begins to focus on them. So now the threat is the Arcane Brotherhood are beginning to target the player characters to steal one of these items back. Maybe that's the new now, right? I get rid of all these or modify them. So this is a living document. It's a living set of plot lines. You should move forward with this really at that constant living at that constant level. That's why you just want to keep it as bullets, because if you're rewriting these plot lines all the time, you are going to make yourself crazy. Just keep it as bullets and keep in your mind what's going on, what are the pieces on the board, how do they merge together. Be liberal and forgiving of yourself as a DM to mix those plots and try something creative and new. That's how you do it. And then you plug in. I'm going to finish the quick overview. So that's the other thing I said is a scenario write-up. So I wrote this scenario. I'll quickly go over this. This is typical. Like I write, this is a session. I had a whole, and like I said, I'm running Icewind Dale, which have these encounters set up, right, already. But I added a bunch of my own. So I write up something equivalent to that. So an encounter is just backstory, potential scenes, foes that you might face, and things like that. So I have these Ysgard sessions. So they're going to the plane of Ysgard. That's how they found out this whole thing about that was the big reveal of the MacGuffin to the players. They went to the plane of Ysgard, found the backstory of the Norn and what Orville has done, and now they've emerged with that knowledge, and now they're really going to go forward and try to undo it. So there's this sort of longhouse that a giant was guarding the portal into Verbig had been guarding the portal into Ysgard. So the players, there was a set up some secrets I put down, that the site is consecrated to Orville. To undo Orville's blessing, they have to cast ceremony twice. If they remove the dedication to Orville, 2 cold light walkers show up. So those are some secrets I put in there. Stakes: recovering the site as a base, undoing the blessing of Orville, and reducing the followers in the area. So that's what I basically put: the setup, the secrets, and the stakes to an encounter. Any foes that might be in there, items that they might recover. I add a neat a piece of art if I can. The stone circle in the labyrinth, like how to get into the other plane. So like once they're going, I put a picture for it. Once they go through this labyrinth, if they turn back, they take their hit dice and damage is terrible. Ysgard, over in Ysgard itself, there's like a farmstead encounter. There's a bog of fallen warriors. I covered that in a previous stream. So again, secrets, who the environment, what are the stakes, tree of life and death, blah blah blah. So this is what I do for encounters. So it's traditionally what you would find in a like a module. So I wrote my own encounter, but to complete out the session notes quickly, since we're running out of time, and I'm going to cover an idea for an encounter that you can use in your own game. So themes, I put plot threads in there. These always go back to the front document that I just showed. Strong start. Next session is they're in a fight with a vampire, so that's going to be their strong start. I list out some potential scenes, secrets and informations that they might be able to find there, usually 10 secrets that they might be able to uncover, and then important NPCs. I just list these out there. So one thing I said at the beginning of the stream, I'd say something to avoid. As you'll see, I don't have some grand campaign document or setting document. I don't have that. I think there's a huge mistake. No, don't be sorry for all the questions in the DMR. I really appreciate it. Do fronts change? Yeah, no, I really appreciate the questions. So the thing to avoid, many game masters in their mind think they need to keep an encyclopedia about the world. I actually don't think that that's worthwhile doing, and I think it's a waste of time. Everything I need are in these session notes. Sure, maybe like an NPC is no longer listed in this list and I need to look back at a previous session note. But at least for me, that's almost never a problem. I very rarely have a problem looking up an old NPC. So I would say you don't need this encyclopedia backstory write-up. You don't need to write a Wikipedia for your world. I really think that is wasted effort. Like if you're doing your own setting and you enjoy that, God bless you, more power to you. Maybe you do need that. But I'm running in Forgotten Realms. I can just refer to the Forgotten Realms wiki. I don't really need to do that. So I just do this session prep. Important NPCs, and the last bit is fantastic locations. So I can, gives me a moment to think through, okay, I don't want just a gorge. That's like this location here. I want this gorge to be consecrated to a god, have some special monsters and special environmental properties, and this gives me a section to think through that. All right, so that's my note-taking technique as a DM. That's what I do. I hope you reference some of this for your own good. Check out the two things you need to do. Check out fronts. It's hard to find a good write-up for that, but a few people have them. So check out the fronts system. Check out the Return of Lazy Dungeon Master by Sly Flourish. Great book. And then the last bit is, so all of this tied together, this is really called, there was a question earlier, the Indian DM, do fronts change as the game progressed? Absolutely, because there's a technique called spiral campaign development, which is you begin with the kernel of the story. So I have my players and I have an initial plot line, and then you begin to branch out based on their interest from there. And that's how you evolve your fronts. What are the players pursuing? What plot lines did they find interesting? I probably have half a dozen plot lines during the course of this campaign that I just straight up abandoned because the players didn't pursue them. And I just give them some rumor that they hear later about how that worked out to make the world seem breathing and interesting and things like that. But I just walk away from them, literally. And so I keep it focused on what we're doing next. Yeah. Any specific resources you can point me to for fronts? Yeah, ask on Twitter. I just Google it. Dungeon World is a great, if you have that system, check it out. There's a good write up there on fronts. I actually get mixed up. Dungeon World is an extension of the Powered by the Apocalypse, which the creators of Dungeon World did not create. And I actually think fronts might be mentioned in the Powered by the Apocalypse. So check that out. All right, I'm actually going to cap off today's stream by giving you a scenario you can use. Sorry, this is all description because I came up with this on the fly. What I had was the players were traveling with a bunch of reghead barbarians to their next set of this quest, which there's no point to go into. The players got to this old abandoned tower. I wanted to give them, just to camp as a way to camp over in the wilderness. One of the players cast Detect Magic because they wanted to find something interesting. And I had nothing. I didn't have a random encounter. So I just came up with I said, okay, yeah, you do discover something. And I'm going to give you the way this progressed. I just said, well, I needed something sinister. So I let them find necromantic energy under the ground. So the plot line I set out was this. They uncover a grave. On the grave, because Van Richten's guide just came out, it's a lead sarcophagus. Written in lead on the top of it is, "Here lies Van Richten, whatever his full name is, Van Richten, killed defending the world. That's what I wrote. The players, knowing the book, were immediately like, oh my God, what is this? This is awesome. And they sense this intense necromantic energy coming from it. It set up a great tension for the game because the players were expecting either to go to Barovia, which I wasn't going to do. I just wanted a little side adventure, or for like a vampire or something crazy to jump out of the grave. They were ready for a fight. So they peel back the lead-lined coffin and they find the body of Van Richten with this, just holding this orb in the sort of the shriveled, freeze-dried hands. It's this crystal orb about the size of a softball with this glowing mist inside of it, and that's the source of the necromantic energy. Now, the reason I did this is because I've used maybe a third of the content from Rime of the Frost Maiden. Some of it I don't like. Some of it I just couldn't get into because I just didn't have the time. We have to wrap up this campaign by the end of the summer because... and I'll show you why I'm showing you this in a second. Because one of the players is having a baby, and I want to get this campaign over wrapped before the baby comes, because I just know they're not going to have time to do the campaign. And I'd like to end it on a good note for everyone. So there's a great scenario I can't get to just because I don't have time, but I love it. It's a gnoll vampire. So yeah, they have all these fang creatures, and maybe they have the gnoll vampire in here. There's a great... No, I'll have to go to creatures. But there's a great symbol for the gnoll vampires near. So I wanted the gnoll vampire to show up. So I wanted some incarnation of a vampire. That's why I chose Van Richten. So what I had is the players find a cursed item. Now, they don't know it's cursed. They pick up the item. They cast Identify on the item. It takes attunement, and it's basically this big gray sphere that's a vampire detector. It can, within several miles, like 5 miles, pinpoint the location of any vampire in the sector. And they're like, great, this is awesome. I'm going to attune the item. What they don't realize is that it's cursed. Not only can the players find any vampire, because they appear as this little tiny speck of glow that on the edge of the sphere, like their direction and distance, bearing and distance is what they get. Not realizing it, but when you're tuned to the item, that lets any vampire within 5 miles automatically know the location of the bearer. So all the players know is they go to sleep, they're expecting something. It had this great tension moment. The players are staying up, they're on guard, nothing happens. They finally kind of go to sleep before morning. It's not dawn because the area is locked in perpetual darkness. The player with the globe wakes up and they see this tiny speck of floating light on the edge of the globe, and it's getting oh so imperceptibly closer to the center. So now they're like, oh my God, a vampire has been detected. It's coming straight at us. They try to get up with the people they're escorting and move on. And I rolled weather. So I rolled the weather and got a 1, which is the worst weather you can get. A blizzard hits, and the players just watch. It was like this moment out of Aliens. Thanks, Fever Dream Studios. Great to have you here. Moment out of Aliens where they just watch this little light get closer and closer and closer to the center over time until just before it's right there. They're holding torches up, but they can't see because of the blizzard. They all get attacked by gnolls, and one of them is a gnoll vampire. And I'll show you the image because it's totally awesome. Is it a gnoll? I don't know alphabets. Gnoll vampire. Look at this thing, man. This is awesome. So it's a CR8 creature. The player characters get into a fight with it, and it was lasting so long I had to end the session in the middle of the fight. I actually don't know. It might be a TPK. It's a CR8 creature. So yeah, and actually if a TPK happens, they totally will deserve it, and I'll tell you why. Because at the end, the paladin character who can turn undead used their turn undead ability on the vampire, and it succeeded. The vampire was about to run, but the player character wizard, who's 5th level and never got to use their fireball spell, decided they want to use their fireball spell. So they dump it on the gnolls, including the vampire. It does shit damage, and the turned vampire is no longer turned, and the fight is going to continue. I thought I would end up with this great session where the vampire's turn runs off in the distance, and I would be able to have this like looming, pending doom of this Knoll vampire that might return someday. I was really looking forward to that. And then the player breaks the turning. So honestly, if the players die next session, that's on them. So be it. I hope they don't. I don't want that to happen. I want it to be exciting adventure. And we've almost had 2 TPKs so far. And if they give me an out, I usually will give them some recourse. I'm not like a killer DM, but if you're not willing to kill the player characters, there's no risk, and you have to let it go. So yeah, boy, this is going to be a great session. I hope so. For me as a DM, I hope it is for them. Anyway, all right. Thank you very much. I'm going to wrap this up here. This is where I'm going to end it. So thank you very much for joining me today. I really appreciate it, especially if you hung out for the whole stream. I stream every week, every Saturday at noon Eastern time. I hope you'll join me on Twitch. This is also streamed on YouTube as well. So you can go ahead and find this on YouTube there. All the archives are there. I think I'm not an affiliate, Twitch affiliate, so it only keeps a certain rolling archive of my shows. But all my shows are over on YouTube. It's just the same show here. So check those out. I also hope you will find me on Twitter. I am Optional Rule on Twitter. I am optionalrule.com with my blog. I've not published a blog article in the last 2 weeks. I'm trying to migrate the site to a static site generator. I'm having some difficulty because it's a little slow and I'd like to speed it up. And I kind of went down that rabbit hole. Plus, I'm starting a new company. So, yeah, that's a lot of time. But yeah, I will get something up. My next article is going to be on how to set up terrain exploration and sort of unknown versus unfamiliar versus familiar and maybe home territory, and what that means for getting guides and survival checks and ambushes and all that stuff. There'll be an article on that soon, so I hope you'll check that out. I hope you'll like this video, subscribe, do all those things, share it on your social media. Any shout outs are always appreciated. I really appreciate the kindness of everybody shown on Twitter and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, thanks, Indian DM. I'll write an article on fronts. The advice I just gave would basically be the article, but I should write that. You're right. That's in my giant backlog of things to do. That's an article I should write. Maybe if I probably am not going to get to the terrain one this week. And I could write that article off the top of my head. So I'll probably do one this week on that. So watch for that on optionalrule.com. All right, I'm going to wrap it up here today. I really appreciate you joining me. Thank you so much. All the followers, returning friends, everybody like that. I really appreciate it. I'll be back next week. I hope you'll join me then and ask some questions. In the meantime, ask me questions on Twitch, Twitter, all those great things. It's great to have you here. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining me. Until next week, remember, fun is not optional. Thanks, everybody. You take care. Bye-bye.